Welcome to episode 3 of REWIRE with Rhona. In today's episode, I will be discussing why high-achieving women are so at risk of hidden or silent burnout. When was the last time you stopped to ask yourself, not just how well you're leading others, but how well are you leading yourself? The last time you felt like a leader, not just someone who leads. There is a difference between being a leader and actually leading. And if you are sitting with these questions right now, not surely how to answer it, this episode is definitely for you. Being a leader is not just checking the boxes and managing the teams, delivering results. True leadership means nurturing your own well-being and authenticity while guiding those around you. Women often excel in the first part, never missing a task, driving and achieving timelines and results. Yet they rarely achieve the second part, as they are so busy nurturing everyone else, but forget about themselves. There is a meaningful difference between simply leading and being truly a leader. What is striking in many industries is that this is a silent epidemic. It's happening quietly, persistently, and at an alarming rate among the most driven women in professional life. Women who lead teams, run departments, manage organizations, are also holding together families while building their careers, and often do it without realizing they're burning out. Not collapsing, not visibly struggling, not asking for help. Burned out in the way that high-achieving women burn out, silently, stoically, and with exceptional professionalism. I have a very clear memory of a colleague of mine, one of the most capable women I have ever worked alongside. You will know that person too. She was the first to arrive and one of the last to leave. She thrived on the complex challenges. She was the person everyone called in a crisis. The one who always had the answer, the plan, the composure. And then one day I watched her in a meeting and she just sat there, vacant, staring at a presentation about a project she had once championed, completely detached from the room. It was like watching a vibrant diamond lose all of its brilliance in a single moment. That was burnout completing its trajectory, quietly, behind the performance, behind the title, but slowly wearing her down. Today, I'm going to take you through the specific symptoms of burnout in women leaders, why they present differently to what we typically imagine, why they are so easy to miss, and what the science tells us about what is actually happening beneath the surface of a woman who's still showing up and still delivering. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The higher you rise, the harder it becomes to see the signs. And the longer you miss them, the more it costs you. So let's burst the first myth. Burnout doesn't always look like exhaustion or a breakdown. For those who set high standards, symptoms can be subtle. Do you recognize a persistent restlessness or feeling emotionally flat, losing joy in the small wins or questioning one's impact while outwardly maintaining excellence? These are warning signs, the triggers that we can blindly sail past. From my experience, I remember being congratulated for achieving what externally seemed impossible to senior management. On the surface, I smiled and gave my thanks, but inside I felt nothing, just an overwhelming sense of on to the next deadline. I'd forgotten how to take joy in the wins. I kept telling myself I will celebrate after the next milestone is achieved as a stretch goal. But slowly, every morning, the spark that once driven me felt further and further away. No one noticed, not even me, until I realized I'd been on an autopilot for months. I would even scoff at the little wins being celebrated by others in my team, because to me, they were just little wins, whereas to everyone else, they were major accomplishments. And in truth, they were. So today we'll look beneath the surface, unpacking the signs of why burnout among women leaders often goes unrecognized. What's the signs we should watch for? And how cultural expectations and self-imposed pressures add to this invisible weight. We'll talk about practical steps to recognize, address, and prevent the silent burnout. If any of this resonates with you, you're not alone, and it doesn't have to stay invisible. So let's start this conversation together. Before we talk about symptoms, I want to talk about why. Why are women in leadership positions disproportionately affected by burnout? Because they are. The data is unambiguous, and I think it's important we name it clearly rather than dance around the issue. A December 2023 report found that 65% of employees experienced burnout that year. But among women in senior and leadership roles, the figure is significantly higher. Research consistently shows that women in managerial and executive positions are more likely to experience burnout than their male counterparts. Not because they are less capable of handling pressure, but because the pressure they carry is structurally different. Women leaders are more likely to absorb the emotional labour of their teams. They are more likely to be held to higher standards of behaviour as well, expected to be both authoritative and warm, decisive and collaborative, ambitious and selfless, all of this simultaneously. They're more likely to be interrupted in meetings, to have their ideas attributed to someone else, to have their authority questioned. And they are more likely to carry the invisible load, domestic and family responsibilities alongside a very full professional life. This is not incidental, this is cumulative. And cumulatively, it creates a chronic stress load that the brain and body were not designed to sustain indefinitely. There's also something specific about leadership makes burnout harder to acknowledge. When you are the person others rely on, when your role requires you to project confidence, steadiness, and capability, admitting that you're struggling can feel like a fundamental threat to your professional identity. So you override the signals, you reframe exhaustion, you use discipline, and it is extraordinary and admirable discipline to outrun depletion. And you keep going, often successfully, until you can't keep going anymore. I know this because that is exactly what I did. I was working 12 to 16-hour days, and it was particularly on what was supposed to be a dream holiday. But I was sitting in a camper van with the beach visible through the window, completely unable to step away from the laptop. My mind was racing and I couldn't focus in the 45-degree heat I was working in. But I told myself I was fine, and I took an hour away to feel calmer. I went straight back to the screen, but I can guarantee you it was not fine. Now let's talk about the symptoms specifically. Because burnout in women leaders does not always look how we imagine it to be. We picture burnout as someone who cannot get out of bed, someone who stopped functioning. But for most high-achieving women in leadership, burnout looks nothing like that at all. At least not at first. It looks like you, just a slightly grayer, quieter, more depleted version of you. Still managing, still in the meeting, still responding to emails, and carrying on leading your teams. So let me walk you through the specific symptom cluster I want you to listen very carefully for. The first cluster is the cognitive symptoms. And this is truly the most frightening part and often the most misunderstood. You notice that your memory is not what it was. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence, something that never used to happen. You reread the same email 3 times and still can't retain the information from it. You walk into a room and forget why you are there. And you forget about the message that you sent last Tuesday. And you have no recollection of it when challenged on something that was held within that email. It isn't age, and it's not because you're distracted. This is actually neuroscience. So when cortisol, your primary stress hormone, remains chronically elevated under sustained stress, it causes measurable structural changes in the brain. the hippocampus, the region responsible for memory formation and mood regulation, shrinks. The prefrontal cortex, your executive control center, so seat of all the strategic thinking and decision making, and your emotional regulation becomes impaired. For women in leadership roles, it's particularly devastating because the qualities most demanded of her, clarity of thought and strategic vision, rapid and sound decision making, precisely the qualities that burnout systemically dismantles. In my experience, I personally wound up relying on post-it notes for everything during my collapse. My keys, purse, phone. Without the post-it notes, I could not leave the house. I was terrified. I wondered if this was early onset dementia. Thankfully, it was not. It was my brain under physiological assault from sustained unaddressed burnout. Another cluster of symptoms you need to watch out for are emotional symptoms. You may be experiencing emotional numbness. That's a growing detachment from your team, your work, from the people and projects you once genuinely cared about. In clinical terms, this is depersonalization, one of the 3 core dimensions of burnout defined by the World Health Organization. Tasks that once felt meaningful become mechanical. Relationships that once energized you now feel really draining. You find yourself going through the motions of leadership, making the decisions, running meetings, sending updates, all the normal stuff. Yet you feel very absent from it. There's also increased irritability, so perhaps you snap at people that you respect. Small frustrations feel disproportionately large. Your patience, which previously was a real strength, has now become threadbare. This is not a personality change. It's the amygdala, your brain's detection center, has become hypersensitized under chronic stress. It begins triggering alarm responses at stimuli that would not previously have registered as threatening. Your brain is running in emergency mode. Everything feels like too much, because neurologically it is. And then there's the loss of joy. So dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, reward, and pleasure, begins to drop and burn out. The things that once lit you up go flat. So perhaps you've closed the deal you've been working on for months and you feel nothing. You received the recognition you truly deserved, but you feel nothing. You take the holiday you desperately needed and you feel nothing. And it's not ingratitude. This is neurochemistry. The next set of symptoms that you may notice are physical. This is your body communicating to you. The question is, are you listening? Chronic fatigue that sleep does not solve is one of the most telling physical signs of burnout in leaders. You sleep the 8 hours and wake up already exhausted. In burnout, cortisol becomes dysregulated, either chronically elevated, keeping your nervous system in a low-grade state of alert, even during sleep, or blunted because of overuse, leaving you without the energy that you need in the morning. So normally in the morning, you will have a cortisol surge, and this is what occurs in the normal, healthy, functioning body. However, often we see that this is actually not occurring in the morning time because of the cortisol dysregulation. So your sleep has stopped being restorative, and no amount of rest fixes that underlying dysregulation. You may have persistent headaches, a gut that is unsettled and reactive, and burnout profoundly disrupts the gut microbiome. It alters your digestion and can trigger or worsen conditions like IBS. You will experience muscle tension, particularly in the neck, shoulders, and back, as though your body is permanently braced for an impact that never quite arrives. Also, you will find that you're more prone to frequent illnesses is suppressed under chronic stress. Women in leadership find themselves catching every cold, every infection that goes through the office. It is not bad luck. This is your body telling you that it has been running beyond capacity for too long and no longer has the resources to mount a full immune defense. And then, alarmingly, there is the cardiovascular strain. Research by Toker et al. In 2012 found a significant association between burnout and increased risk of coronary heart disease. For senior women in leadership roles who already face elevated cardiovascular risk compared to their lower stress counterparts, this is not a distant concern, it is an urgent one. The fourth cluster of symptoms that we see are behavioural. And the weird thing is, these are the ones we're usually most proud of. And this is where it gets complicated. The behavioural symptoms of burnout in women leaders are often the very behaviours most celebrated in our professional cultures. Working the long hours, being the last to leave the building, taking on more when already at capacity, saying yes when every cell in your body needs you to say no. Treating rest as something to be earned rather than the biological requirement it truly is. Measuring your worth entirely by your output. I want to say something directly. These are not strengths in isolation. So staying long enough without recovery, they become the architecture of burnout. And the woman who is most celebrated for her relentless commitment is often the one closest to the edge. Consider Sarah. She's a marketing executive whose mornings began by reaching for her phone before she even had got out of bed. She took the train commute to and from the office, took late night calls regularly, and finished work normally around 11 p.m. She felt increasingly disconnected from her work, and it was a job that she absolutely loved. She had a growing sense of going through motions without enthusiasm or any meaning. That disconnection was becoming overwhelming, and the boundaries between her professional and personal life had dissolved entirely. And she had not even noticed because the performance had never stopped. What Sarah experienced, and what so many women in leadership experience, is the slow erosion itself that happens when output becomes the only measure of value. Sarah recovered. It took commitment and change, but the first step for her and for everyone is recognizing what is actually happening in your body. There is something I call the leadership paradox, and I think it's important we name it because it's one of the reasons burnout in senior women goes unaddressed for so long. Leadership, by its very nature, requires you to project stability. Your team looks to you for direction, confidence, and calm. Your organization looks for results. And so the very role that places the most demand on your cognitive and emotional reserves simultaneously makes it the hardest to acknowledge when those reserves are running dangerously low. You manage up and down simultaneously, absorbing the anxiety of your team without always having the safe space to process your own concerns. You're expected to be the model of well-being while operating in a system that often structurally don't support well-being. And you have likely spent years building a professional identity around ability, competence, and composure. An identity that makes vulnerability feel like professional risk. So I want to challenge that framing directly. Acknowledging burnout is not weakness. It is the most strategically intelligent thing a leader can do. Because a leader in full burnout, which is cognitively impaired, emotionally depleted, and physically unwell, is not serving her team. She's not making best decisions. She's not bringing her full capacity to the problems that require it. Recovery is not a retreat from leadership. It is a return to it. So another case study I have is of Lisa, who was an overworked medical practitioner. For months, she had suffered from insomnia, feeling increasingly that she was making no difference to her patients in her care. When a trusted colleague recognized her struggle, she encouraged her to seek support. Lisa attended a peer support group for healthcare professionals, and through the honest conversations that the group had, and with others who genuinely understood the pressures she faced, she found new coping strategies and a renewed sense of purpose, both in herself and in her profession. She did not step back from her leadership. She returned to it more whole and with a better ability to cope and to lead, focusing on impact, not just output. That is what recovery makes possible. So, I want to be honest with you. There is no 30-day fix. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not being straight with you. But recovery is real and it is achievable. And it begins not with a program, not with a protocol, but with two things: acknowledgement and assessment. Acknowledgement first. You cannot navigate your way out of something you have not seen clearly. The tendency, particularly for driven women in senior roles, is to keep reframing. I just need to get through this quarter. I just need a holiday. I just need things to calm down. Burnout does not resolve when things calm down. It resolves when something fundamentally changes in how you work, how you rest, how you relate to your own limits, and how you define what success actually means. So I recommend you grab a notebook or some paper and ask yourself the following questions. When did I last feel genuinely rested? Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. What have I stopped enjoying that I used to love? What signals has my body been sending that I keep choosing to ignore? And finally, and most importantly, if a member of my team described what I am experiencing right now, what would I say to them? That last question is powerful. Most women leaders would immediately recognize burnout in someone they care about, a member of their team, and respond with compassion, clarity, and action. Don't you deserve exactly the same response? Inside my book, Break Free from Burnout, The Ultimate Blueprint, there is a 15-question evidence-based burnout profile checklist built on the WHO's ICD-11 classification of burnout and current psychological research. It assesses the three core dimensions: the emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. And it takes less than 5 minutes to complete. And it gives you the kind of clarity that most people spend years trying to find on their own. I have also built an app, which should only take you 3 minutes, also with questions, which will tell you approximately where you are on the burnout scale. And I will give the link to that app in the show notes. So knowing where you sit in the burnout spectrum is not a diagnosis. It's only a starting point. It's a map. And you cannot plot your recovery without knowing where you currently stand. So once you know where you are, then you can start to build your support network. One of the most important things I learned through my own journey and my recovery is that burnout is not meant to be navigated alone. I was fortunate to have amazing friends, an incredible life coach who I hope to be doing a podcast with shortly. I had amazing therapists and medical team, and of course, my family, all who noted the changes in me and spoke honestly about what they were seeing. Reaching out isn't weakness, and for a leader, it is often the hardest thing, yet the most necessary. Whether we reach out to a trusted colleague, a mentor, a therapist, or a coach, finding one person who can witness your experience without judgment changes. So I had a male colleague who worked in IT, and he was always working on high-stakes projects with relentless deadlines. Initially, he hesitated to reach out to anyone about what he was experiencing, which was a growing sense of depersonalization. His wife encouraged him to reach out to his mentor, and eventually, once he confided in his mentor, they developed a series of regular conversations that became the scaffold for his recovery. He found a space where he could explore the challenges and find solutions with someone who genuinely cared for his well-being and who taught him power of the most underused word in a high achiever's vocabulary, no. The mantra that guided my own recovery, and one I still return to now, is this: own your day before someone else does. Choose how you will spend your time, focusing on protecting your energy with the same precision and ferocity that you protect your organization's resources. Because your energy is your most valuable leadership asset. And believe me, it is not infinite. Women leaders are not burning out because they're not strong enough. They're burning out because they are extraordinarily strong. And this strength has been stretched for too long without adequate recovery. The symptoms described today are not signs of failure. They're signs of a system that has been asked to do too much for too long without the recovery it requires. They're honest, they're biological, and they're telling you something important. So, today's episode has resonated. If you've recognized yourself somewhere in what we have discussed, I want you to do one thing before this episode ends. Take your notebook or some paper, write down one signal your body has been sending to you that you have been choosing to ignore. Just one. And commit to addressing it this week. That is where recovery begins, not with a grand plan, but with one honest acknowledgement. If you are ready to go deeper, then my REWIRE with Rhona course will be opening on the 28th of September. And I will also put a link in the show notes around that course. I have also released an ebook recently, Hidden Burnout: Why Professional Women Are Most at Risk. REWIRE with Rhona is my 6-month program that will be opening on the 28th of September. It is a 6-month course with micro-learnings pre-recorded, with live sessions with me for question and answer. Also, you have access to Rhona AI, who's your 24/7 hour coach. And there is a community where you can discuss with other women experiencing often similar challenges and at different stages, either in avoidance of burnout or in their recovery journey. And there you get to share, and you will also find great support from people who genuinely understand where you are in your leadership, where you are in your avoidance or recovery from burnout. So until next time, I want you to lead yourself with compassion and the same compassion that you would give to your team. And I want you to know that you deserve exactly that, the same compassion and the same care. So until next time, take care. Bye.